down the traditional media. If I have to report something, I'll have to first verify, I'll have to get my story approved from my editors, I'll have to write a script. It may take, maybe even for a fastest reporter, half an hour to 1 hour to get a story on air. But when you have a smartphone, when you're using your social media, you yourself become the reporter, you yourself become the editor, you yourself become the broadcaster or the transmitter. So you don't have to depend on the regular protocols that a mainstream journalist may have to go through. And you also have the multiplier effect. We can't be there in all the places of Chennai, although the entire city is affected. But you are present everywhere. You're able to report from areas where even the mainstream media will not be able to access easily. Lastly, one example which is relevant to your college. I was reporting from Idiki, from the Munnar Hills a few weeks ago. We heard about a tribal settlement which was completely cut off because a river was flooded there. It had completely cut off the road connecting the tribal settlement. Even for a journalist like us who don't have a problem in terms of hiring a boat, even hiring a helicopter, we could not go there. But they told us students from MCC had reached there already and they had provided some supplies. And this was again possible perhaps to a large extent by the power of social media, because even where mainstream technology, mainstream media technology is not able to penetrate, a simple phone with good connectivity is able to expose problems even before mainstream journalists are able to reach there. That's the power of social media. That's how it's becoming any calamity, any crisis of this kind is becoming a global issue where people across boundaries are coming forward to help. Lastly, there are again challenges. If I can take 1 minute. Challenges, unverified reports, that's a major challenge. People don't have that access to verify before they put it on social media. Sometimes that could be provocative, sometimes that could be also because of some selfish interest. You're from a particular village, you may want to promote that, you may want to sideline some of the areas which are badly affected. Secondly, people also use this for propaganda purpose or for promoting their own selfish interests. Their focus may not be really to reach out to help the helpless, but to use this as an opportunity to promote themselves. And lastly, this is effectively working in the initial stages. But maybe a week later after the crisis, social media has not yet evolved to organize in a much better way so that the help you're able to mobilize reach in a wider area. We focus on smaller pockets at smaller levels. Sometimes our help reaches the same communities again and again. Imagine if in Kerala, using the technology, if we had mapped all the locations. Okay, there are 5 villages, 300 people living here. It's not difficult to find out what the exact damages suffered by these 300 families, what exactly each family requires. Maybe this family may require a stove, 3 mattresses, basic furniture, utensils, give them your bank number, account number. Moment they get help, remove them from the list. So that you can use technology to help in a very targeted way than in a haphazard fashion. These are challenges. I'm sure we'll be able to achieve this as we gain experience in the days, months and years to come. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Sam. Sam raised many good points that I think that we can address individually. I'm going to turn to my second panelist, also a veteran of reporting on floods both in Chennai and Kerala, and ask you, Ms. Priyanka, from the digital news outlet, the News Minute, to talk a little bit about your approach to both natural calamities, how social media helped you, and if you could respond also to the challenge that he posed, which is how, as a reporter in the field, do you fact check some of the social media posts that are flooding your screen?
Right. Thank you so much for this opportunity. So, first of all, the two disasters that I reported are the 2015 Chennai floods and the recent Kerala floods. And the approach to the two were very different because for the first one, I was in a newsroom in mainstream media. And for the second one, I was a part of a digital organization which relied very highly on social media. So let me tell you something. There are two truths when it comes to mainstream media. Number one, will a flood in Chennai be covered as extensively as a flood in Bombay? No. And number two, social media drives the agenda of national media. So what worked for Chennai in 2015 is the fact that every single person here was tweeting about the Chennai floods, or they were writing about it. For a long time, mainstream media didn't pick it up. Yes, it could be because they didn't have enough people, but one of the truths is that they don't cover the south as extensively as they cover a Delhi or a Bombay or any other, or that part of the country. So that's something that we need to accept. So at this point of time, what happened on social media was there was a deluge of comments. So when my boss picks up Twitter and he scrolls through, he says, listen, this Chennai floods is becoming big. We need to do something about it. Because we know the flood started during Diwali. It was not like it came all of a sudden upon the city. It was developing through time. So by the time national media picked it up, it was already a huge problem as far as Chennai city was concerned. People were evacuating their houses. So they got to it a bit late. And social media became even more important for the national media at that point of time and for the reporters here because the Tamil Nadu government clamped down. They weren't very easily giving out information. What was the exact death count? We didn't know for a long time. Which were the areas highly affected? We didn't know for a long time. And sitting in Bombay in a newsroom, which is controlling the dissemination of information, we relied highly on social media. We had to look at tweets, we had to look at Facebook posts and get them fact-checked with our reporters on the ground. And we can't also simply take in videos and pictures that were being put up. That was an extremely difficult situation, and we have 2 reporters here in Chennai. How many places can we send them to? Areas were waterlogged. It was impossible for them to keep traveling. So what we did at that point of time is we actually approached citizen reporters. So we put out messages and tweets saying, please send us visuals and images from your localities with your phone number. So as soon as they send it to us, we call them, we cross-check with them, is this yours, is this what is happening? And we actually used images and videos that people sent us, people of Chennai sent us. That's what we actually telecasted. So I think that's a very huge role that social media played as far as the 2015 floods is concerned. It started dialogue on the floods as far as the national media is concerned. And so that is something that I would like to tell you about the 2015 floods. The Kerala floods that I recently went to Kerala to cover, this time I went as a reporter. And I was covering it from ground zero. So the minute I walk into Kerala, the first thing I see on Twitter is there are cracks on Mullai Periyar Dam. And then somebody tweets saying, don't help the people in Kerala, they're all rich. And then you have more tweets saying, you can't send any supplies to Kerala, all roads are blocked. Was that the truth? No. So the same social media which actually spread awareness can also has another side where it could actually stop any kind of relief from going into a particular place. So once you get there, you hear the Mullai Periyar Dam is cracking. In fact, the Kerala government had to approach WhatsApp CEO and say, please do something to stop the fake news, because we're trying to help people there. So I think one of the biggest differences between the 2015 floods and the Kerala floods is that even the government in Kerala picked up social media as a tool to disseminate information. So a lot of us journalists were actually on a WhatsApp group with the Chief Minister's office. So we were actually putting out like verified news for the Chief Minister's office. We were telling him where the areas are waterlogged, which kind of communities require more assistance, what kind of assistance do they require. Some areas cannot be accessed by the trucks they were sending or by the huge cars, they needed boats. So one thing is, yes, it's a citizens movement, definitely, but I think when the government gets involved as well within this outreach through social media, that is when a movement truly progresses into being of true help to the people in that particular society. So that's one of the main things that is required, because that way the Chief Minister can come out and say, no, this is true, this is not true. The government is actually giving you data on what exactly to believe. So that is one thing. And number two, I think as a journalist, we should know our role on the ground. Number one, our first role is to disseminate facts, to give information to the people who are being affected. Number two, our role is to debunk fake news. In Kerala, you had websites like Malayalam Manorama, you had Mathrubhumi. They actually devoted sections of their website to debunk fake news. These are your two roles. And of course, you can go beyond your call of duty and you can get into this role of rebuilding that society. That is when you give out information on which where the relief centers are located, how people can go there, what they require, and how many boats are required in a particular area. These are the things that you do in order to ensure that the community that you're reporting about is benefited. So this is something that we need to get very clear. What is our difference? Where does our role as a reporter stop, and where does the role of an activist start? So you need to understand this particular issue. And the thing is, when you go into these relief centers, you learn what kind of material that they require, and immediately you put it on Twitter. So I'm sure when the Kerala floods were happening, you heard that in Coorg also there were landslides, and there were very, very heavy rains. So Coorg is a small area, and they have about, for example, if they have around 25 relief centers, you can point out exactly which relief center requires, and you can put it out on social media, and people can direct their resources accordingly. So that way social media plays a very huge role, while national media is preoccupied with trying to figure out what is the intensity of the damage done, how many people have actually died, and trying to get the numbers. What social media does is add a more humane angle to this whole situation, and it actually ensures that you understand what the ground situation is, and this emotional response, which is how it starts off, soon it translates into action. It translates into something that will help the community on the ground.
Thank you. Thank you. Before I turn to the activist in the room, we'll stick with our third panelist, who's a journalist, who's calling in via Zoom from New York, where it's early in the morning. Thank you, Mr. Wasim Ahmed, for joining us. I was wondering if you could shed some light on your experience as an American journalist who has reported on disasters in the United States, and how social media has helped or hindered your reporting.
Sure. I can hear my echo there. I can hear myself talking. It's very strange. Maybe I'll take one of these headphones out there. Okay, so thank you for having me. Sorry, I didn't realize I was towering over everybody's heads on the screen there. But I covered for the first time flooding in 2006 in Binghamton, New York. That was what they call the 100-year flood, which has turned out to happen several times since then. And so, like my other colleagues said back then, there was no such thing as social media. We didn't even allow commenting on our website at that time. It was not a thing. And so we were kind of caught a little bit flat-footed. But we kind of started, we realized that we had to start crowdsourcing this sort of thing, and we put out a call on our website, please email us your photos. Yes, this was when all that didn't exist, so people started emailing us their photos, and the most pressing concern for people in our community was, is my house safe? Is my cousin's house safe? Is that my business safe? Or is this place okay? Can I go this place? And it was more about, can people, know if their loved ones are safe? So we started posting it online. We actually opened up forums, which was like a primitive way that people could start commenting, and people would start to ask, and we'd go through our photos and see if we had this place. And, this was all done before social media, which was kind of crazy. We had more hits than we'd ever had on our site to that point, which was, I think, like 3 million in a day, which was that many people looking at our site versus our normal amount of hits, maybe about 150,000 in a day. So people are really interested in learning about this stuff. And so that was when I was as a working journalist. When the Hurricane Sandy hit New York in 2012, I was a journalism professor at Stony Brook University, and the whole game has changed. There's all the social media was out there now. We could get our message a lot faster, as you can often hear. But with this came a lot of dangers. With Hurricane Sandy, and I'm going to share my screen here for a second here. With Hurricane Sandy, you would see a very common thing that people would, I'm trying to figure out how I can get this photo up here. Give me 1 second. So one of the common things that you would see is people will be posting photos of sharks in waters and crazy photos from things, and these are all fake photos. And you know, a trained photojournalist would be able to tell. You're seeing, even more recently, you're seeing this photo from Hurricane Florence, and it looks like our president is in a boat in a full suit, giving someone who needs help a red hat. You know, this was shared 275,000 times, and people believe this was a real photo. But in reality, what you're seeing is this was the actual photo, and it's a Photoshop. And so, in many cases, the real danger of social media is that you don't have that extra level of vetting that's going on. And so one of my areas of research here at Syracuse University is on what's commonly called deepfakes. I don't know if people are familiar with the term, but it is video that you can put someone's head and swap out and basically make them say anything. There's a very popular video, if anybody does a Google search, of Jordan Peele doing an impression of Obama and creating a deep fake of that. But the real big thing that's coming up in media and what would need to happen to prevent these sort of photos from going viral, and Facebook is researching this, and there are other deep learning companies researching this. I don't like the term deep fake. That's kind of a term that's been very co-opted by the pornography industry, so I like to call it synthetic media. And so we'll go with synthetic media. But there are companies out there that are developing technologies to combat and detect this synthetic media. And so in the past, a trained photojournalist could take that photo of Donald Trump in the boat, run it through levels in Photoshop, and really see the edge cutouts and figure out that something is fake or something is not fake. But one of the real issues that you're seeing today is that, and you're seeing it sometimes when you know, journalists are tweeting out information like, oh, President removed a bust of this person from the Oval Office, and then it turns out not to be true, is that people are not taking that extra step to verify. And so any automated technologies that are coming out are really necessary to verify this. But the big thing that my students learned from covering Hurricane Sandy is it's really important, like, it's always been important to when you're doing this coverage, put out things with search engine optimization in the way you write articles, the way you write your headlines. But the students, to coordinate with each other, would often create a hashtag specific to our group of reporters that was covering it, so that way we'd have a collection of tweets and Instagram photos and everything that were our group, so we'd know our movements and what we were covering and where everybody was stationed. But then we'd also use hashtags and other things that the larger groups were using. You know, so if there was a relief effort from Crisis Response International and we were in the same area, we could, you know, kind of latch onto their hashtag, and then the message gets out there. Because the main role of media, as it is here generally, is that it's not about necessarily forcing people to activism with the coverage. It's more about presenting what's happening, and in my view, hoping that people call on their better angels to go and help folks. I talked with a group that was doing relief during Hurricane Sandy, and I think one of those rescuers probably said the most important function of media, because I was out there with Newsday covering Lindenhurst, New York, which had been underwater. And a person basically walked up to me with my camera and said, "Why are you taking pictures? Why are you, you should be putting that camera down and just helping us, lift all these things out to us and do that." And he got very angry, and my normal approach is to engage and try to calm the situation down. But my colleague is like, "Just leave him alone. He lost his house. This is just, let's keep going." And maybe one or two houses down, someone from the relief organization Crisis Response International kind of stopped me and my colleagues. I saw what happened back there, and I want you to know that the most important thing that you guys are doing here, we're using our gift from God to help these people clear out their house, and to tear down the wall that had been mold, getting mold and stuff. And you're using your gift of photography to tell our story. And that's really what it is. And actually, what ended up happening is the Crisis Response International people ended up using a lot of what was produced from Newsday and from myself and from other photojournalists to recruit people to join their organization to help during other disasters. And so now you'll see that people are kind of joining these grassroots organizations based on what they've seen from Crisis Response International social media, which draws upon journalists' work. And then there's another organization called the Cajun Navy that was out during Florence and other things that have happened here. And people don't know about these things unless the journalists are doing their job and reporting it, and then that work is being shared on social media. And so it's kind of a two-pronged thing. Journalists are doing the work, it's getting shared on social media, but not even coming, it's here. The real other big need is, as my colleagues are talking about, was to combat fake news and fake images and all of that stuff. And I will say, my colleague here who was just speaking from the News Minute, I was so happy to hear that you guys actually call people who post the photos on social media and verify that they're real people. I can tell you from being on both ends of things here that one of the unfortunate realities and how fake images like the shark images, the Donald Trump images, things go viral is that people aren't necessarily calling, and so that's so impressive. But anyway, I don't want to take up all the time, so I'll leave it right there.
Thank you, Wasim.
I don't think I can hear this. Okay.
Audience is applauding, and I thank you for your words. We do have a little less than 30 minutes left. I want to give an opportunity to our fourth panelist to speak about his role as an activist, and then we will open it up for some questions from the audience, so students. So our fourth panelist is not a journalist, he's an activist. He's a project coordinator for the Kerala Rehabilitation Project. He works for the Environmentalist Foundation of India, and I want to recognize the Environmentalist Foundation of India, EFI, for its incredible work collecting more than 120 tons of relief materials. It's been supporting both rescue and relief and long-term recovery operations in Kerala. So, welcome.
Thank you. So as Adin mentioned, we are doing a lot of work in Kerala on rehabilitation work, and I think we definitely owe a lot of our activity right now in responding to the Kerala floods, to the work that we had done during the Chennai floods. And while a lot of people were talking about the Chennai flood during 2015, Cuddalore was also being flooded. And at that point of time, we were one of the few organizations that actually worked towards getting a lot of supplies routed in that direction. And so we use the same approach again this time, and we've made a few tweaks to it. The first definitely would be to mobilize social media to get relief materials, as many of the speakers before had also mentioned, about how you get relief materials there. So while social media does play a very big role, at the end of the day there is also a need for us to actually go to the ground and do something. And again, social media does play a very important role here. And I think just before this panel, I was also speaking to Samsa, and he was saying that for some time after the disaster, again, you notice that things start waning away, that you start seeing that a lot of these hashtags, like hashtag Kerala flood, for example, becomes much less common, and we get drawn back into the normal news cycle. So when our effort, our endeavor is really to keep that momentum going and to actually keep doing work on the ground, which we can see a lot of benefits from. So in our second stage, which is what I'm really coordinating, we go in to Kerala, we work with the government, we work very closely with the government. They give us projects, they tell us, okay, this, for example, right now we have got a project in Kochi where there is a lot of water, water bodies, drinking water bodies have been contaminated with a lot of waste, excrement, a lot of other material, and it's no longer fit to drink. So we've got a project where we're supposed to restore some of these water bodies to a condition where it can be used sustainably into the future as well. And that's our second phase. But our third phase is actually ensuring that once we have done this, the community is able to sustainably take forward what we have done and are able to become self-reliant. They don't need a lot of relief materials. Otherwise, it becomes like this constant need for the government to keep funding, putting in funds, and for us, I find that this is the most tricky part, because there is so much that is involved in this, especially from a psychological perspective, I find, and to get people to actually recognize that the rains are over. That I was in Kochi just last week, and there it started raining out of the blue, and everybody was like, no, oh, okay. They were still reliving that trauma. So to get over that is a very important phase that we need to go through. So essentially that is our three-step approach, and we engage a lot of social media in the first stage and the last stage, and documentation is very important, I find. So social media plays a big role in that as well. In the first week of September, we got a lot of calls from government offices that had heard about our work in Chennai through social media, and had therefore approached us to actually take up some work and take forward and reroute some of our relief materials, which were going to places which were relatively better off, and were able to actually, at that point we'd already sent relief materials to. So social media has a very big role in that as well. And finally, social media in a sense also creates a sort of community in that sense, which would be very important. We have a very strong base of volunteers in Chennai, in Bangalore, Hyderabad, Pondicherry, who donated a lot. The 120 tons of relief material that we procured was thanks to our volunteers, thanks to our community that we built. So with social media, I think that's one thing that you can use it for. I understand that there might be negatives of it as well, but from our perspective, I think we've earned a lot of trust in that sense. So we have been able to leverage that a lot more to actually mobilize materials and volunteers into creating a more sustained impact, both in Chennai, where we still have a lot of projects going on even today, and in Kerala, where we're just ramping up at this moment.
Keep it on. I have a follow-on for you. So Sam mentioned possibly using online tools to map where the need is. How does EFI identify where the need is so that you can direct your efforts? So
our approach again is very closely linked to the government. We have been working very closely with a number of officers at the block level, block being just above the village level, where they aggregate a lot of people in that area into relief shelters, and we look at the numbers that are there, and we call them and check whether they've received anything so far. We found that a lot of people donated clothes during this time, and there was actually, there was some confusion about whether it was a fake news story or not, but there was actually a mountain of unused clothes and old clothes which were just dumped on the side of a highway because there wasn't enough meaning there wasn't the necessary clothes firstly, and secondly, clothes weren't what people really required at that point. That's why we never sent clothes. We only sent dry rations, and we sent them to community kitchens. So it's very specific requirements that we actually have, through our experience, actually worked towards and understood.
Thank you. All right, I'm going to turn to the audience or the panelists as well if you have questions for one another. This is your opportunity to speak up. All right, is that a hand? I can't tell. Go ahead,
From
stick it
here,
up there.
from back there.
Oh. Do I see a student with her hand? No. Okay. All right. While you're working on your questions. Okay, we do have a student. Wonderful. And please, if you would, before you ask your question, tell us your name and what you're studying and where.
My name is Maria. I'm doing my final year, my third year here at the Department of Journalism. And my question is like two of our panel members spoke about how their experience was when they were reporting about the floods. So did you ever encounter troubles with, you had someone giving you a drop saying that, there's something happening here, these people are stuck over here, so, you need to run and cover it. So that kind of a very high pressured moment, how do you pick what is the right one and what is not the right one? How do you make the choice?
Well, it's a very difficult question. Well, basically, as a policy, we don't take what we see on social media at face value. But if someone calls on phone, that we take it seriously. One example I can give you, when the major flood struck on the 1st of December, I was in Dubai attending a conference there. But I got calls from a few members saying that they live in a low-lying area. There is an expectant mother who needs to be moved to a hospital, and they didn't know who to call. Fortunately, as journalists, you have the officers' numbers, and when you call them, they react, they respond quickly. So we were able to connect them immediately, and she was quickly moved. We sent some boats there to move. So that way we help. But in terms of physically going there, that depends where we are at that moment and how serious is what they say. Is there any other way of also confirming? And sometimes it's quite possible that they look for an individual help which may not be of that major a crisis. Unlike this case where a pregnant lady is expecting medical help. So that's a difficult call, and you take at that moment, depending on where you are, how much can you, the kind of access to that location. As television journalists, we also look in terms of visuals. Call it, you can criticize us, but that's one major criteria where if you go there, are we able to show that? And so your role as someone to help is there, but we are reporters basically, so we need to report. So that's our primary concern, but as citizens, as responsible people, we do a bit in terms of mobilizing help as well.
So when the 2015 floods happened, this was a huge issue. People kept putting out messages saying, this person is stuck here, there's water till my ears, I don't know how to leave, my wife is pregnant, my sister is pregnant, I'm stuck in a house with pregnant people. So you don't know, like, how do you respond to something like this? I remember getting voice notes where this woman is wailing. She's like, please help us, we're going to die any minute. So as a journalist, like I said, your job is not to go into that place and rescue them. That is not your job. Your job is to alert the right authorities. Fortunately, as journalists, you have the right contacts. You know who to alert over which issue. So the minute you hear something like this, the first thing you do is alert the NDRF or the SDRF who are actually working there. So that's a huge problem. But like Samso said, during the Chennai floods, a lot of times when rescue officials went to the particular place, they found out that 2 out of 10 times is when they actually rescued somebody. The other times the information was outdated, it was wrong, that's a huge problem. So in the Kerala floods, what my organization did was, we were actually coordinating tweets and coordinating with rescue officials. So we were figuring out how we can ensure that they get to the right places on time. So we kept a limit for ourselves, like 4 hours. Let's say a tweet or a Facebook post is more than 4 hours old, we'll find a way to contact the person who has put out the tweet or the post and ask if that person is still stuck there, is it still a problem. That is when we call the rescue officials, because we need to understand that they have limited resources operating there. People are coming voluntarily, sending them to dangerous places when there is actually no problem there is a crime by itself. But people are also putting out these messages and sharing it out of goodwill. Nobody is doing it because they want somebody to get stuck and get into trouble. So you can't say don't do it, stop the goodwill. But what you can do is advise them to keep checking. So you get this, don't just forward it, don't just retweet it, share it. Verify, take like 5 minutes of your time, verify. Since you're doing a good deed anyway, verify and then share it. So that's what is expected of everybody who wants to help.
Thank you. Good question. Next question. And also, feel free to ask our panelists here who are in person as well as online. Wasim, you can join in.
Yeah, this question is open to anyone in the panel. Like ma'am, like you said, the coverage that the national media does for Chennai and Bombay is quite different. Like we all know that. So what is the scale that determines the the coverage of such a disaster? Like he said, even Kadalur was affected by the floods, but we never saw like proper coverage of that floods. So where does the moral aspect here comes? And what is there a kind of a scale that determines which gets proper the first priority or which doesn't? Is there a scale to determine that?
See, there's no scale as such. Like Sam sir said, the resources in a Chennai bureau, for example, there'll probably be 2 reporters at any point of time. Whereas higher up you have more number of reporters, you have more resources, you have more OB vans. So that's something mainstream media, that's a limitation that they face. So if there are 2 reporters here, you send you keep one person in Chennai and the other person you send them to say Pondicherry. So where is the next person to send to Kadalur? It takes time. They do get to the situation, but it takes them more time than say like any other form of media to actually get to that particular position where they can give you a 360-degree view. And that's where social media comes in, right? That's where your citizens come in and they tell you this is what is happening. So you prioritize based on how severe the incident is. So let's take this, like Chennai floods was covered so extensively. Would you say Chennai floods and Kerala floods was covered equally? Which do you think got more attention? Kerala, 14 districts were under red alert. Chennai is just one city. So it's about like how, at the end of it, they did get to it, right? In fact, the regional media in Kerala did a fantastic job covering the floods. And that is what really matters, because people over there are mostly, like, they are very happy with Malayalam. So more information is disseminated in Malayalam, they're better. So it's not that the mainstream media, the national media always has to descend upon a particular news. As long as it's disseminated, I think that's what our end goal should be.
So, I can jump in there too. One of the things you're seeing across the journalism world is that the first people that are being laid off, fired, cut from newspapers are photojournalists. And photojournalists are usually the ones with their boots on the ground, their eyes and ears on the community. In fact, New York's picture newspaper, the Daily News, just laid off all of their photographers this past summer. And so that's one of the most important parts of doing this kind of coverage is what kind of manpower do you have, or woman power, or whoever you have. If you are at a newspaper, especially a medium-sized newspaper like I was at, you could count the number of photographers in one hand, and so you have to rely on social media to kind of fill in the gaps, because if the roads are blocked from, and this was the case in where I was, if the roads are blocked and you can't even get your photojournalists to one area, you know, you can't get that coverage, and you have to rely on the public to provide that coverage. In some cases, when I've worked flood coverage, when we know that something bad is going to happen, like after that flood, we knew the following floods could possibly be worse, and some of them were, we would actually station our photographers. We'd put them out in a hotel in that area the night before, you know, knowing that the roads would be impassable, but they could at least get photos from that area and file from remotely. And that's sometimes how we can get coverage, but it all comes down to how many people do you even have in a bureau or in an office.
Question on less coverage in South, that is true to a certain extent, but now things are changing. For example, as far as national media is concerned, South India accounts for around 50% of your TRPs, which determine your revenue part. And now if you see all the national media, there is an increased focus on what is happening in the South, particularly in Chennai. Earlier issues which we would have thought would not make good national news are now being attended to, or now being covered, because Chennai in that sense is becoming a huge market. But yes, the manpower, as my colleague from New York said, that's a major issue, because after the economic downturn, we used to have 5 reporters in Chennai earlier. Now we're just one team. So when a crisis like this happens, we parachute people from other cities. And for example, if you take CNN or BBC, they may have one correspondent for the whole of South Asia who takes care of countries like Sri Lanka, India, Pakistan, Nepal, such countries. So for a national channel, we work like that. For the whole state, there will be just one correspondent. If there are issues happening in Kadalur, in Tirunelveli, we do travel. But immediately, it may not be possible for us to deploy resources, because we don't have the numbers. Secondly, a national channel waits for a trend. Say, for example, during the Jallikattu crisis, regional media went big the same evening when around 2,000 people gathered on the marina. But for us, every day there are protests happening at various pockets of Chennai. We don't cover everything immediately. But if it becomes a trend, the next morning we will certainly cover it. But there were tweets saying national media didn't cover it. No, because we can't cover each and everything which may not be interesting for a national audience. We do cover certainly when it becomes a kind of an important crisis. But for an audience, from a layman's point of view, it may look like Chennai is being ignored. That kind of a perspective.
One more question from the audience.
This question is to Ms. Priyanka, and it's not really about a natural calamity, but what is the experience to report from a newsroom headed by Arnab Goswami?
Well, it's definitely a unique experience, and it was very dynamic. Like, if we're going, since we're on the topic of disasters, covering the Chennai floods there, it was definitely dynamic in the sense, yes, we had to, like Sam said, we had to wait for the trend to start covering the Chennai floods. But once we did, we go all out. And a lot of times when the regional media can't ask questions to the government, the national media can. So that's a huge difference, because the regional media is too close. And it's difficult for them to always ask very tough questions, but the national media can ask very tough questions. We can sit in a Bombay and Delhi and ask Chief Minister, what are you doing? Why are you not doing anything for the people? So I remember, like, Arnab going on air and asking, what is the government of Tamil Nadu doing to help the people? If the people are sending out boats, if the people are sending out help, if the people are sending out food, what is the government doing? So I think at that point of time, at that kind of power center, you're really empowered to ask questions to the higher authorities, and you're not simply tied down by reporting it's flooding in Saidapet, it's flooding in Nungambakam. You look at the larger picture. You can pull out like relevances from across the state, and you can tell people how you can ask the right questions to the right people.
Thank you. Since we are running out of time here, I would like to end the session with a question for the panelists. And I ask Dhruv to take the first stab at it. You're looking at an audience here full of students, future lawyers, future journalists, and in general citizens, including myself. How should we in the future respond in a helpful manner in the wake of a natural disaster?
There's really no right way to respond to the immediate effect, because the cliche answer would be don't panic. But when everybody is panicking, that's usually when you find that social media is extremely, it's not as useful as it can be. So while social media has opened up a lot of doors for us to actually engage with disaster locations, it should also be, we should also look at more long-term and sustained efforts, because if you're looking at just the immediate restoration, you're not rehabilitation, you're not going to be able to create an impact. I think the Kerala government has done an excellent job this time with this flood. There is a possibility with growing climate change that these events are going to happen a lot more frequently. So we should think about, with every disaster that comes our way, we should not think about how do we get back to where we were before the disaster. We should say, how do we prevent ourselves from getting into the situation again? So I think that's a good note to leave it on. Jai Hind.
Would any of you, would you like to comment? Final words?
Well, I think, like Dhruv said, we can't stop at the rescue. We can't stop there. We need to look at the rehabilitation, and I think digital media gives you the kind of space to do that. So as soon as the Kerala floods got over, like our stories don't stop there. We start talking about how do you rehabilitate these people. What is the kind of budget that the government has to allocate? What is the kind of help that they will need? And also, I think some of the advantages are like you can follow up. As a journalist, like what I can do in this situation is I can follow up on what is happening. And number two, I can tell you what lessons to learn from this flood by talking to people from, let's say, an EFI and aggregating information from several sources who understand the technicalities behind this, who understand the environmental ramifications. We can tell you what you can learn from this and how you can prevent it the next time, so we don't make the same mistakes over and over again. Let's say let's say that it's going to rain heavily in Chennai again. We're almost hitting the monsoon. So what, are we going to face the same kind of floods this time? Has the government finished desilting all the canals and rivers that they claim were responsible? Like, I remember in 2015 the government said the only reason for the floods was because it was raining extremely heavily. It was unprecedented rains was the excuse they gave. But that's not true. It's because a lot of buildings were on wetlands, lakes were encroached upon. This is something we need to acknowledge, and I think as journalists it's our job to get the government to acknowledge it and to ensure that going forward we are not put in that kind of a dastardly predicament again.
Social media is to stay, and I think the mainstream media should take a leaf out of that. Now that technology allows every one of you to be reporters and wherever you are, it's time mainstream media has people in all the districts. Perhaps when there is a crisis, there need be no excuse that we don't have the manpower. Everybody has a smartphone. If they could pick up some young students like you in various districts, during a crisis you can become a reporter from that location using a smartphone. You have Skype, you have various other apps which make live streaming so easy, and you're all communicative, so you can develop as reporters during those situations, so that national media, which at the moment is being criticized for not reaching out to such rural areas outside the main cities, they can still do a good job without spending more money, but using your technology, using your expertise. As consumers of news, it's also important that every one of us play a proactive role. If you think a particular channel is not giving space, all it requires for you is to email the feedback of the channel, to tweet them. So when audience respond, when you take up these issues with the respective channels, chances are things would start changing. Already it's changing. There is a larger focus on southern India. But whatever way as youngsters feel it could be better, I'm sure if you start extending feedback, reporting that we expect this, we are not happy about your coverage, I'm sure editors will take note of that and things could pass change. Thank you.
Just to add one last comment, I guess, is that if you are reporting all of this, the big thing to remember is it's all about people. And one of the things I found that's most powerful when reporting is if you are talking to someone who has, lost their home or really affected by this, get their contact information, and then when you're telling the story later on, follow up with them. I followed up with the same people that I talked to the first time after Hurricane Sandy 1 year later, and you could see it created a story because I could see where they were at right after the hurricane, and I could see that a year later that New York's rapid response, all that stuff didn't really help them, and how they were still struggling. And so, remember that, in reporting, it's about the people, and that making these contacts and then actually following up with them, not just following up with government organizations, but the people that are covered, could be one of the most important, powerful ways to keep help coming, keep the message going.
Thank you, Wasim. And thank you to all of our panelists today for this informative discussion. Thank you also to the team from the Public Affairs section, Dipti Kumar, Prem Srinivasan, TGV, Mogadar. Thank you all for helping put on a great workshop. And finally, thank you to our host, Dr. Balaswamy, and your team, Dr. Rachel, for hosting us here today. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Bye.
Thank you, everyone. I would now request our Self-Finance Director, Mr. M. Balaswamy, to facilitate our guest, Ms. Kathleen.
Hi friends, I am Subha Mohan from Wales University. I am a law graduate, and it's different to interact with those journalists, future journalists maybe, sitting here. So I had in the morning I had thought that it's irrelevant away from the subject. I thought we got information that media law is the topic. So I thought media law doesn't play a major role. But here what I understand is we social engineers need to engineer the virtual society as well. So I feel the importance of this workshop and the topics discussed from the morning pointed me that whether you are right or wrong. And this emphasized the importance of every single message to be shared or forwarded by youngsters, which is done in a glimpse of seconds. So I thank you, Consulate, for organizing this wonderful workshop. Thank you, ma'am, and the MCC and other invitees who invites me, and other friends who are sitting here, journalists. Thank you. Thank you.
Good evening. So from the morning, whatever we were talking about, whatever the topics were, and whoever were our guests who spoke to us, we at the end, we came to know that, yeah, like even when we use our social media, when we see something, the first thing that probably comes to mind is like, okay, fine, it looks really funny, I should just forward it. But after this, workshop that we have today, I'm pretty sure anyone who gets a message like that or you before you criticize any media organization for not reporting any events that's happening or any disaster that's happening, you'll think twice. You'll be like, okay, if I was in their place, what would I be doing, or if I am forwarding something that's wrong. And if there was a ma'am who came and told us, there are the numbers that comes through our forwarded messages, you just pass it on probably into your family group or your friends group where we have like 50 people in the group. Maybe at least 5 of them will call. So there will be hundreds of groups in which these numbers are forwarding. So what kind of an impact will, if that's a fake news and there's a poor person whose number is being forwarded, what that person will be going through. So I'm pretty sure after this we'll be actually thinking about fake news and the pictures that's being forwarded, what impact it will have, what decision you make about it. So thank you, ma'am, for hosting that for us. Thank you.
Towards the end, I would like to say, the secret of crisis management is not good versus bad, it's preventing the bad from getting worse. Now, I would request Sharon Thomas to deliver the vote of thanks.
A very good evening to everyone present here. It has been a long day with a lot of healthy discussion on a well-thought topic, what to believe. We had an insightful workshop with a variety of themes discussed under identifying fake news and disinformation. I had loved to take this opportunity to thank the US Consulate General in Chennai for associating with the Department of Journalism, Madras Christian College. I had like to thank all the guest speakers for sparing us their precious time and creating this workshop a perfect pack of experience talk. I'd like to thank the Director of Self-Finance Stream, Madras Christian College, and the faculty members of the department for their support. And once again, I thank every participant for making this event a grand success. Thank you.